Written by Andrzej Sapkowski.
Hello everyone, and welcome to the Entertainment Landfill Book Club. We're doing The Last Wish, a Witcher book series, if you will, by Andrzej Sapkowski. Now, like the author's name, I have to warn you, we may get some names wrong as we talk about this book. I'm not doing this show alone. I am the J-Strom, by the way. I'm doing it with Ross Ponyi from the Bay Area. How's it going, Ross?
It's going great. I just want to let you know, Jason, my room right now is completely full of the smell of lilac and gooseberries.
Oh, nice. Mine is filled with chamomile.
Very good.
I just thought that was funny. You know what's funny about this book, just beginning? The very first part is basically a sex scene.
Yeah, it is. And it took me 2 listens through to... I did not read this book, just to let everybody know. I listened to the audiobook. If I were to try to read it, it would probably take me about 6 months. But when it took me a long time to figure out who the heck he was having sex with in the beginning.
Yeah, I know. It really helped to go back after finishing the book and just reading the Voice of Reason chapters, because basically this book is short stories kind of bookended by a present day story, if you will. The Voice of Reason is Geralt, the Witcher, Geralt of Rivia. He is recuperating at this temple of Meletali. How did you say it? Melitala. With Neneke, who is nursing him back to health. But at the very beginning of the book, he's like resting, and this girl crawls into bed with him and starts poking him in the face with her breasts.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing that was a little confusing to me. Was he recuperating from the attack with the Striga that you find in like the first story? Is that what's supposed to be happening? Because yes. One thing I will say about this book, I loved it. I thought it was great. It was one of the most refreshing fantasy books I've like experienced in a long time, but it was very confusing in terms of the like the timeline for everything.
Right.
So did you pick up on that? If that was the fight with the Striga from... So that was supposed to be... Okay,
basically,
that's kind of what I thought.
Basically, it's like this. The Witcher, that chapter with the Striga, has just happened. And then cut to the Voice of Reason. And now Geralt is recuperating and remembering these other stories.
Yeah, okay. It's so weird because, like I said before, when I listened to it the first time, I picked up on none of that. I thought it was just a bunch of, like, kind of tacked together stories that, kind of went around the same basic theme, but weren't really connected that much. So when I listened to it the second time, I was like, oh, gosh, you are really dumb, man. So, yeah.
Well, no, I had the same problem, and I was just thinking, okay, each of these stories happened at a different time in his life. And then I was like, wait a second. This stuff, because the way it ends as he's leaving the temple and stuff happens, I'm like, oh, wait, this is happening now, I think. And so I went back and just read The Voice of Reason, like just skipped to each of those parts, and you see it fits together as him just recovering in this temple. And Neneke is... basically, I don't know. How do we begin the book? Do we just start talking about it?
Yeah, pretty much.
I assume that everyone who's listening to this has read the book. Otherwise, you're going to be very lost. But I will just say this little introduction. Recently, a trailer came out to Netflix's series called The Witcher. I've always been a little interested in The Witcher. I knew it was a series of games that looked kind of cool, but it really looked too large a world to dive in. Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't know what the hell's going on in this. I don't know if I should just dive in with The Witcher 3. What are the first 2 games? Like, I don't know. But after I saw this trailer to the series, I'm like, the first thing I read was the producer of the show saying, this isn't based on the video game. it's based on the books. And I'm like, oh, what the hell? There's books? So I did a search on the Witcher book order. And there's a series of novels, but first there are these 2 books of short stories, and it recommended you read these 2 first, which is The Last Wish and the other one that I'm blanking on, and Sword of Destiny.
But those books they weren't the ones that were originally released. Like they weren't released in chronological order, right? These books didn't come out first. There were other books before these 2. Is that correct?
Basically, in Poland, where the books, The Last Wish, these short stories were released there first. I think the first story, The Witcher, was released in a magazine.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
So, what I think happened is, over time, he continued the story, like short stories, and then wrote novels. But I'm not sure of the order they came out here in America, but I think the novels came out first here.
Got it. Yeah, for me, it's weird because I had always seen this series on lists of top 10 best fantasy series. And I'd always, for some reason, kind of avoided it because in my mind, I don't know why I had attached it to the Nick Cage movie, The Season of the Witch.
Oh my
God.
God.
I thought that it was all part of the same thing for no reason whatsoever. I don't know why I did that. But I just kind of thought, if the movies are getting that treatment, it's a property I don't want to attach myself to. So I just kind of avoided it. And in classic me fashion, my first impression of stuff is usually pretty wrong. So when you suggested it, I was like a little skeptical, but I was like, okay, I'll give it a listen. And my goodness, I loved it. I thought it was the entire time it kind of played on the cliches that you get in a lot of those books that get so tiring after a while. Cliches that, feel good and feel kind of like home when you're listening to them, but, they just get worn out after a while. And this book kind of played on those the entire time. And that's what I really, really enjoyed about it.
Yeah. I immediately like Geralt. He just seems like a cool guy, like very laid back, What's weird is the very first story, The Witcher, he immediately kills a couple of guys in a bar. But he never really acts like that again through the rest of the book. Do you agree?
No, yeah. They almost introduce him kind of like the classic man with no name in, in all the Clint Eastwood movies. So, he comes in, they don't even introduce him as Geralt. It's, he's introduced as the Witcher, and he comes into this bar and just, obliterates a bunch of people, kind of like Clint Eastwood would do in one of those movies. But you don't really, it's true, like you're saying, you don't really get that vibe from him really anywhere else in the book, Yeah,
even that guy, I think his name is Ostrit, he kind of accuses him of doing that just to, to gain notice or something. So they will take him immediately, and they kind of propose that the king is in need of a witcher because of a Striga. And it turns out it's the king's daughter because he had, these stories have to always have incest in them. Apparently,
exactly.
He had a baby with his sister, and it was all a scandal. And she died in childbirth and gave birth to this. Did she look? I can't remember if she was disfigured, but she die? She was dead when she was born, right? And then they put her in the crypt, and that's when she became a Striga and would go out nightly or whenever to kill.
So did the mom die as well in childbirth? Is that what happened? Because I know they were buried next to each other in the crypt. Is that what was supposed to happen?
I believe so, yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah, that story was very interesting to me because I was talking about them playing on cliche and everything like that. Or how do you pronounce the author's name? It's Andraj or how do you say it?
I just call him Andre.
Andre. Okay, yeah.
Well, in Polish, the entire J's are kind of they're just there to confuse you.
Yes, I totally understand. But it's really interesting the way that he writes these characters and kind of builds this world. As he's talking to that Castellan Lord Velarad or whatever.
Yes.
he totally builds the world through just like rumor and this conversation that they have, and you just get this whole vibe of the way the world is, that it kind of feels like a Disney fairy tale world, but like soaked in Budweiser. It's like it's a very familiar world, but just with this slight kind of seedier twist that I just really, really enjoyed. And in that conversation that they have, where he's talking to the Castellan or whatever, or Lord Valorad, that was like when I first started listening and was like, oh man, I could really, really get on board with this.
Yeah, I love the dialogue. The way that he writes dialogue is so rich. Like, I love when... my favorite part is whenever anyone's pissed off at the Witcher and, like, insulting him, and he's just kind of chilling there looking at him.
Yeah.
They're calling him a fool, and, like, you're here, you're an embarrassment, get out of here, or whatever. And he's just, like, just sitting there taking it. And this guy, Ostrit, he basically says... the king wishes no harm to come to the Striga because it's his daughter, but we would like to offer you a counter offer to kill her, and then we will give you this sum of money and just get out of town. But I think interesting is Geralt, he decides to do what he thinks is the right thing and try to cure the girl. What's funny is when you first hear about the Witcher, he's a monster hunter. He goes around killing monsters. But really what he does is he tries to solve problems, doesn't he? He tries to figure the stuff out. Like, he doesn't go right to the Striga and try to fight and kill it. He wants to try to cure it, which I thought was really cool.
Well, and that's not at all the way that the character's introduced. The character's introduced going into this bar and killing these guys. You think he's going to be this bloodthirsty kind of, justice-seeking Avenger type person. But it's true, like you said, he's much more of a thinker. It's a really interesting character.
I'm gonna say I got a Batman vibe from him. Am I crazy for thinking that?
No, definitely, because there's the whole part in the beginning where it talks about his chest full of like potions and everything like that. I geeked out on that a little bit, and I was hoping that there'd be a lot more of that throughout the story. But really, in the first one is he takes a bunch of drugs basically to make himself superhuman to go fight the Striga. And
I love that when he first takes it, his eyes are black, and Ostrit shows up, and he's like, "Blah!" Like he sees his face.
Yeah, exactly. And he's trying to basically when the other guy comes up, he's trying to there's so many names in this book that I'm just going to be calling him that guy. When I think it's Ostrit, is that the guy that like he basically insults him, and then he goes and ties up and uses his bait?
Yeah, Lord Ostrit. Basically,
Lord Ostrit.
Foltest is the king. King Foltest.
Got it. I like when he takes all the drugs and is basically trying to keep it together because he's so amped up that he doesn't want to, give away the fact that he's using superpower stuff, basically.
Yeah, he's trying to stand very still, not to give away that he's lightning quick, basically.
Yeah.
And I love that when Ostrit, he's like, "Get out of here now, or I'll draw my sword." And, Geralt's just like, just, you need to leave, or whatever. And he pulls the sword, and Geralt just easily just knocks him unconscious, and he waits tied up.
Exactly.
And he's like, "Oh my god, I'm bait, aren't I?" He figures out right away.
So what did you think about the character, the king, Lord, or King Foltest? Did you have any opinions about him?
As kings do, their parents die and they're left with everything, right? And he knocked up his sister, which is pretty screwed up. And I don't know if he's a good person or a bad person. He's definitely flawed.
Yeah, it's actually fun. Like, I kind of found him to be one of the most interesting characters in the entire book. And I didn't really pick up on this until the second listen, in that, like, when he's introduced, he kind of really digs in on the whole cliched, like, king who's there and treating everybody like garbage, and he's the most important person in the room. But then when he gets one-on-one with Geralt, like, he totally changes. Like, his character just basically becomes like that of a loving father who's just concerned for his daughter, and that kind of really hit me. Like, when I read, it just felt a lot deeper than you normally get from that type of character. And there was just so much like regret and kind of not necessarily remorse, but when he's sitting there asking him, is it my fault, with what I did with my sister, there's like so much regret and guilt there that you wouldn't normally get from the king, that it was kind of touching. It was one of my favorite points in the actual book, and it's not something I picked up on until, I gave it a little bit more attention.
I like that we get things from his point of view. Like, you completely understand where he's coming from, but also you can see things from the townspeople, being that, like, I think they said that at least 50 people are killed a year by the Striga. So you can understand why, we sympathize with you a little bit, King, but we really need to get rid of this thing. It's killing people every year.
Is Striga a new term? Like, have you ever heard of that anywhere in any of the fantasy stuff that you've experienced?
I don't think so. No.
So what? It's basically a vampire, but it
sounds like it's just some kind of like grotesque deformity, like real long dragging claws on the ground with a mouthful of razor sharp teeth, but it still has her red hair, kind of. It's kind of messed up. It's just some kind of weird beastly thing. Yeah,
I feel very bad for the kid afterwards. know. But anyway, I'm jumping ahead.
I like the bit where Geralt is just laying in wait, and he can hear really well because of his elixirs, and he hears Ostrit running, but he hears him stop, and then he hears him basically get eaten.
Exactly.
He didn't make it.
that was great. And that whole fight was a lot of fun.
I should mention that Ostrit kind of confesses, like, as he's laying there tied up, he's like, "I will tell you nothing more." Well, okay, I think I might be responsible for this. Maybe not.
It's funny how everybody is kind of taking blame for the whole thing. They're all worried that they're the cause of it. He
was in love with the princess, the king's sister, and when they basically hooked up and had a baby, he apparently wished them ill will, and he basically, he said he has no abilities, he has no magic, but he did curse their name. Maybe he's the cause of it.
Yeah.
I don't know how things work in this world, but maybe that did cause it. I don't know.
Well, I don't know if it was that or if it was somebody, I forget who said it might have been the mother who was the one, when she found out what happened, she's the one that cursed the child. Yeah. Seems kind of a mean thing to do to your granddaughter, but hey, I'm not royalty. I don't know how all that works. So
what's cool when the Witcher, he kind of explains to the king that in order to reverse the curse, you have to sleep in the crypt with the creature overnight. Mm-hmm. And I thought that was really cool. Like, he has answers about, like, yes, I've dealt with Strigas before. Like, he's like, oh, these things happen in this world,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's funny when I first read that, I thought that when it said the third cock crow, I thought that meant that he had to stay there for 3 nights.
So did I.
And so I was like, oh man, this is going
to be a long stretch here.
Yeah, he's going to need more foppish, annoying lords as bait. But when it was the first night,
he just needed it to crow 3 times in the same morning. So
got it. What if you had a rooster that only crows twice? That's
like, come on, third time.
Yeah, exactly.
What I thought was cool is in the fight, they kind of reveal that he has these signs that he does with his hands that do these spells. And I tried to look up what they were because I know we read a few times he did the sign of Quen. Remember that one?
Yeah.
And he also did the sign of Ard. The sign of Quen is a protective shield, like he shields himself. And the sign of Ard is like a telekinetic blast towards something to knock something back. And there's also other signs, but I'm not sure if they mentioned any other signs in this book. I'm sure they reveal more in the later books,
Yeah, I always love. That's one of my favorite things about fantasy books when you get into that world and you kind of figure out how they're handling magic, and him having limited power, having powers, but it being limited, and it also him having to do these hand motions and everything, and really kind of finding out that he's a magical character, but that's not really his specialty.
Right.
I geek out on all that kind of stuff. I love it.
Almost like little devices he has in case he needs to use them. Another one is he wears his medallion around his neck that like quivers and kind of shakes whenever he's around magic. Like he can sense magic is nearby or somebody's going to weave a spell. It like warns him. It's almost like a Spidey sense, isn't it?
I was just going to say it's like a Spidey sense medical alert bracelet, that he's got. So yeah, I think that's pretty awesome. One
thing I thought was cool when he encounters the Striga is he mirrors its rage back at it, where he scares it. And I thought
that's what happened. I was kind of confused as to how he got it to be scared away.
Basically, he absorbed all of its anger and everything and, like, reflected it back on itself. Where it was like, I guess.
That would be like a great customer service tool if you could do that in real life.
I would love to be able to do that. So basically, he fights and tussles with the Striga. And, he wraps it in the silver chain. That's another thing. He has silver. We know that I think we learn in this chapter that silver is what weakens monsters. But we learn more about his swords later on, though.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I don't want to get into too much of that, but yeah.
He gets into the crypt after he basically cripples it, and he drinks a sleeping potion. And then sets like the hourglass on his chest to wake him up. And when he awakes, it's just a naked little girl there.
Yeah, I have a feeling I would have a tough time sleeping. That was one of the things I thought was kind of interesting, that he decided to just kind of take a nap at that point. I guess he knew.
I think the crypt he slept in the crypt of the mother, and I guess the thing is so heavy, maybe he thought he was safe there. That's what I assume. Like he knew he was safe, so he was taking a sleeping potion. Maybe it couldn't hear a heartbeat or something. I don't know, but
gotcha.
When he wakes up, looks like a little girl. When he approaches her, I guess her hands are still claws, and swipes him really good, and he's like bleeding profusely. And he grabs her by the neck with his teeth and grips her, like he's biting down until she submits and turns back into a little girl completely, I guess.
So that was a little bit confusing for me as well. This fight kind of it did confuse me a bit in that I just wasn't quite sure how it ended. Yeah. Or the reasoning behind how it ended. I guess I was a little bit confused as to why him biting down, why he would make that choice.
I think, he was bleeding profusely, and he just did what he could until it became a little girl. I think she was a little girl, but she still had some Striga in her and was fighting back, but he had her in this position of helplessness. Remember, he was holding her hands, by the wrists, and he's got her by the throat with his mouth, just basically pinning her down until finally she gave up.
Gotcha.
Is what I believe. And I think when he mirrored his rage back at her, he scared the Striga into hiding, for the rest of the night. So I think that's how he knew he was safe. And,
it seems like this is the type of monster he faces kind of on a regular basis.
Yeah, they even talk, have you ever dealt with a Striga? And he's like, yes. And just oh yeah, that's on my list. Rats, snakes, Striga.
Well, that's one thing that we didn't touch on before. The cool thing is he's so capable and so calculated and everything like that, but he's also so down on his luck. It's just such an interesting contrast between you have this person who is the best at his field, but his field is not really necessary like it used to be anymore. So he's just kind of getting by, living paycheck to paycheck, which I think is awesome.
Yeah, that I love that where it kind of talks about it later, how even, he'll hear about some creature, but it turns out it's just somebody making it up. They're kind of just...
Yeah.
All right, so I guess like he has a mortal wound in his neck, and he wakes up at the Neneke's home. How do they say her name in the audiobook?
Neneka.
Neneka. In the temple of Melitele.
Melitele.
Damn, I'm never going to get that.
I get it. I understand. And I don't even know if the way the guy that was, doing the audiobook really has it the way it's supposed to be.
Dude, just wing it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, we'll get to that later. He says one character's name the way I wasn't saying it, and I almost was ready to call the guy up and go, I think you're saying this name wrong. But Neneka, she's pretty pissed at him because she's like, are you getting old? Are you losing your reflexes? There's no way you should have gotten this wound from a Striga. It's embarrassing. And she wants to do a reading, or she wants to do a trance with Yola, right? Who just woke him in bed with him, and she's like, "Out, Yola, out!" And he's like, "Wait, I want to talk to her." It's like she doesn't talk. She's taking an oath where she's silent. And he's like, "Oh, that's interesting."
Yeah, it seems like she. Apparently, I guess they kind of had to sleep together in order for them to gain physical contact and emotional contact for them to be able to do the trance.
And he's like, don't yell at her. Don't be mean to her for this. And she goes, what? She's free to do that if she wants to. We're not like that kind of strict around here. It's just like, oh, okay.
But it seems like through that whole act or whatever, he kind of... It almost feels like he kind of has some sort of connection with her. Like he kind of emotionally bonds to her a little bit. Like he's somebody, like she kind of comes into his bed as a surprise, but after that he's not. It doesn't seem like he's really used to just doing one night stands or whatever. Like he seems to be kind of wanting a little bit more from her. Not necessarily a relationship, but he wants to have more of a connection with her.
Well, I think it even describes her as like a nymph when she's in bed with him. Like her dark eyes, she looked like a nymph. And when he wakes up and sees that she's like this freckled, pale girl, he's almost kind of like he's taken aback by it. And then he feels guilty for thinking like he's a little disappointed. Mm-hmm. She's not what he imagined she was, and he then feels instantly guilty. And then kind of there's the first mention of Yennefer there, where he's basically, for a moment, she kind of reminded him of Yennefer, but then he kind of puts it out of his mind immediately, which I thought was interesting.
That whole part, like the hinting towards Yennefer and like really kind of helped through the second listen to go back and see what they were talking. Because I knew there was somebody. I was actually, when I first listened to it, I was thinking Yola and Yennefer were like the same person. For some reason, like I don't know why. But in my mind, I was thinking, gosh, he has much more of a connection to this Yola girl than I had thought initially. But it was just me
I think in
not picking up on things.
In a roundabout way, it's basically saying that sleeping with that girl, he just wanted her to be Yennefer the whole time.
Basically, that's kind of what the vibe I picked up on it.
And then he felt guilty thinking that afterwards. And he felt bad. What's funny is these... it sets up the next story, A Grain of Truth. But first, I don't remember these two knights show up. They're the Order of the White Rose. Count Falwick and Sir Talus, I think is his name, or Talis. I don't know how you say his name.
I think it was Talos. I'm not quite remembering.
They hear that Geralt, the Butcher of Blaviken, is there, and they're ordered him by Prince of Elendor to get Geralt out of there. And they're like, you have to leave immediately. And Neneka's like, no. This is my house, and he doesn't have to do anything he doesn't want to. And one of the younger guy, Talus, he's just like really arrogant and young and overly wants to kind of throw his weight around. and the other guy is like trying to chill him out, but he's basically talking back to Nenneke. And finally Geralt, basically, when he starts insulting Nenneke, because she's like, this is my temple and I don't have to do anything you say, that guy Talus starts to get pissed, and he starts to draw a sword. And I love this part. Geralt says, if he draws his sword, I'll take it from him and beat the snotty-nosed little brat's arse with the flat of his blade, and then I'll batter the door down with him. And so Talus begins shaking, and he pulled an iron gauntlet from his belt and then throws it to the ground. And then Nenneke says, you dropped something, son.
Yeah. What are your impressions of Nenneke? Like, what did you think of her?
She's like a cool kind of like mother figure. Like, she seems to be worried about his well-being, but also she's got she's a spitfire, She says he's full of nonsense and stuff like that. And I think she's quite a character. She makes an impression right away.
She was also one of the characters that I enjoyed the most, I think. Just because, like, when you're looking at like the voice of reason, right? She basically, I think, is the voice of reason throughout all of these things. She's the one that's trying to get him to. She basically wants him to kind of go down the right path, even though they're diametrically opposed to each other in terms of like their beliefs. He has so much respect for her, even though he doesn't really believe in anything that she believes in, which I thought was kind of cool. Like most of the times in these books, a religious figure is kind of thought of as like the villain a lot of times, and it was kind of refreshing to get one that actually is respected by the main character. Yeah. Even though he doesn't agree with like her worldview at all.
Right, and she even says she doesn't care what he believes in. Like, she doesn't judge him on that, and he doesn't judge her. And I think they describe it as a cult, like a worldwide cult that she's a part of, their religion. And it basically, later on, they describe it, it's because basically what the temple does is it produces women who deliver babies throughout the land. So how could you not need these people, because you need them to deliver your children or to cure the fact that you can't have babies. They help you with that, like with spells or whatever. It's very interesting learning in this world how magic is involved in their everyday lives. You even learn that sorcerers and sorceresses are taxed in towns if they use magic spells and stuff.
Well, that's one of my favorite parts about the book, is that when we have that first conversation where we kind of get the beginning of the world, or the building of the world, with the I think it's Lord Velarad. Like, he gives us so much detail about like wizards and how they're all kind of like thought of as charlatans and scumbags, and like, there's just things that you don't really see in other books in terms of like the way that wizards are viewed. Or he says that whole thing about like when they were going after the Striga. I'm sorry to go back a little bit, but he's talking about going after the Striga, and he was like, 2 shoemakers went after her. And he's like, why are shoemakers so stupid? It just gave such a good view into like the way this world is,
Yeah, there was a good bit there about the different people who'd come to kill the Striga, and if the king found out, he basically had them killed. Because it was to capture the Striga or to reverse the curse, not to kill it. And so if people came there trying to do that, then they would pay with their life usually, or they'd be ran out of town. Now, the Grain of Truth, this was a really cool story, I thought, because the dialogue is so good in this, where Geralt, he's riding Roach. We're introduced to his horse, Roach. He finds a man and a woman on the ground, a father and a daughter, he believes. They're corpses in a wilderness, and she has a blue rose in her hair. And then he finds this manor, I guess an old mansion with a blue rose bush, and as he approaches it, a beast charges him. And it's like a man-like beast wearing man's clothes, but he's like, did he have a boar's head, I guess? Or something.
Yeah, I think he had boar-like tusks, but I don't know if he actually had like a boar's head.
Yeah, and I love he immediately pulls his silver sword and he's standing his ground, and the beast is like, "Aren't you afraid of me?" And he's like, "No." And he's like, "Oh, well." And the dialogue there in the audiobook, that guy does a great job of this guy's voice, doesn't he?
Oh man, that guy, like I have in my notes, the acting is incredible. Like throughout the entire book, like it's not read. Like the guy acts the entire book, which I just thought was incredible. And this is you're right. This is one of the best voices that he has. There's a certain part at the end that I don't really want to get into too much of this story. That just the acting was like, it was awesome.
Yeah, the beast's name is Nivellen, I believe, if I'm saying that right.
He pronounced it Nivellen.
Nivellen.
Which is great because you're like 0 for 4 on the names, which I love.
He gets that Nivellen is that's better. You know, it's got more body to it, you know.
It does, yeah.
Nivellen.
It definitely does.
Nivellen kind of tells the story that the house does what he says. It takes care of him. It feeds him. It clothes him. And I love the image of Geralt just sitting there chilling and having dinner with him. I think he gets some spell wrong and he isn't able to prepare pheasant or something. He's like, "Oh, I screwed up the spell" or something. But they eat food, and then he tells the story about his father led a gang, and they were thieves. And eventually his father died, and he was supposed to be the leader of this gang of thieves, except he was terrible at it. He wasn't a leader, and they sacked this temple. And he said there was something oddly strange about the temple, evil about it. This, basically, they had their way. They were raping and pillaging. And this woman, was she a witch? Yeah, I think she was a witch. She cursed him. And
well, I believe she was the priestess of the temple.
Yeah, she was the priestess. And basically, they were raping her. It's pretty terrible. And she basically cursed him, and when he got home and he woke up, he had the body of a beast.
Yeah, he basically, they were taking him there to become a man, right, because he was going to start leading the gang, and they wanted him to become a man. And so he rapes this woman, and she says, basically, "You're a beast on the inside, now you're going to be a beast on the outside," and curses him.
Right, and what I think is interesting, as he's telling Geralt this, Geralt has questions about, how did this happen or whatever. He's kind of piecing together if this is a curse and if it can be reversed somehow. Like thinks, I love that he's always thinking about things, it seems like. And he tells the story about how everyone left him and he was there alone until one day a man showed up, and I think he frightened them off, and he said something about "leave your daughter" or something, but they ran away. And the next day, a man came with his daughter. Oh, okay, I remember. He basically threatens a man and his daughter, and he says, "Leave your daughter" or something. And they ran away, and he felt so bad, he called after him and he gave him some gold. So that guy left and went back to town saying he got some gold from this guy. So the next day, another guy shows up with his daughter saying, "Hey, I will loan you my daughter for some gold." And so they make an agreement. She will stay with him for a year. And this was very Beauty and the Beast, wasn't it?
Well, that's what I was going to ask you about. At what point did you start getting the major Beauty and the Beast vibes from this?
I got the Beauty and the Beast vibe from the house doing what he said. Like, there weren't talking candlesticks or anything, but
yeah,
it made me go, wait a second here, something kind of familiar here.
Well, it's funny because, like I said about my initial impressions of stuff being wrong, like when I first did it, I thought that like he was ripping it off. Like I was well, this is just a little too much, like Beauty and the Beast. And then as you go along, you're like, oh, he's doing this on purpose. Like it's all like the main part of the story and the world, apparently.
Right. and you think it's going one way, but it kind of goes another. If Belle turned out to be a strange singing vampire monster, maybe it would be.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's the whole thing that I'm talking about, why I like this book so much, about it playing on cliche and what you're expecting. Like, I was not expecting the Beauty and the Beast story to basically be turned on its head and kind of made a little more interesting and a little more, like, devastating. I dug it. At this point, like, when I kind of realized what he was doing, I started to love this book and kind of just know that I was going to really enjoy this entire series, and was very happy with you, Jason, for suggesting it.
I was happy too, because I didn't know. It's kind of like when you hear something's translated from another language, you're like, oh man, this could be bad. This could be like translated poorly or something, and you might be able to tell and just kind of have to fight through it. But I never got that feeling at all.
No, not at all. I was actually kind of surprised when I read in Wikipedia that it was like a Polish book. Because in my mind, I'm very ignorant, and I just think, like, if it's not American or English, which is, like, really the only stuff I've ever been exposed to, it's just not going to be at all the same as I'm used to. And this was, like, exactly the same.
Are the sentences going to be all stilted or something?
Yeah, exactly. Like, it's all going to be about stuff that I'm just not, like, familiar with. But this is, like, it really goes to show you that people are pretty much the same everywhere. But, yeah, it was really cool.
What I think is interesting is Nivellen says that eventually some of the the women that would stay with him, they would start to get feelings for him, and they would have sex, and the next day he would be like, he would run to the mirror to see if that transformed him back, like his curse was over by finding a woman who loved him, But that wasn't it, and he just stayed the same. But then,
well, he gets to the point where he doesn't really want to change. He kind of likes the person he's become, even if he is a beast.
Yeah, he says, like, I have this strength and so much energy, and look, I can bite the leg off a chair, but I need to stop doing that because there's not as many chairs.
I'm running out of chairs. Yeah, that was
I thought that was pretty funny. And eventually, Geralt keeps asking him questions about, well, I can tell you're not here alone. There's someone here. And he kind of gets defensive there. Like, you don't need to be asking about her or whatever. And he kind of, I guess he's kind of mentions that he's been having terrible nightmares lately, where he's like a beast. It's just these horrifying nightmares, and Geralt warns him that could be that his beastly nature might be taking over eventually, and he's going to lose his kind of human thinking.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, like, it's funny because that plays on the whole idea. You remember when you watched Beauty and the Beast for the first time? Or you've watched Beauty and the Beast, of course, back then. Like, people were kind of disappointed when he, like, changed from everybody kind of was attached to the Beast idea. Like, people kind of wanted him to stay the Beast instead of Prince whatever his name was. I forget what it was. And I think that's kind of fun that he played on the idea of, like, well, I don't really want to change. I kind of like who I am. But it is those nightmares that you were talking about that's kind of like, it being the point of no return for him.
Right. And Geralt leaves. I keep saying Geralt.
Geralt, yeah, that's how he says it in the narration.
He kind of like stops upon some mushrooms, and Roach is acting weird. And when he realizes that Roach acted strangely before, and he returns to the mansion, and that's where the girl is sitting on top of this dolphin kind of fountain thing. And I kind of had to go back and read that, like, okay, what tipped him off that something was weird?
Yeah, exactly. I was going to ask you about that because I wasn't sure what part, how he put two and two together there. I thought maybe I just missed something, but it sounds like you kind of felt the same way, right?
Well, it was like, remember, he sees the girl after he finds the dead bodies, he's kind of riding with Roach, and then he sees a girl there, and he kind of waves to her, but she doesn't respond, and then she disappears. And Roach is acting, kind of getting upset, and he has to do the spell to calm Roach over the horse's head to calm, so it'll proceed. And then he realizes that later on, like at the house, Roach kind of acts kind of like that too. Maybe he puts two and two together that whatever's killing these people is actually the same thing staying at the house, maybe? I don't know.
Well, he says earlier, like, Nivellen says, like, oh, he likes me. Most animals like me. And for some reason, that line was connected to, it's what Geralt uses to kind of put two and two together, but I just didn't get it. You know what I'm saying? Like, I didn't understand how he was putting two and two together there.
Yeah, I think it's just telling us that Roach can sense this creature and is afraid. And so that kind of tips him off that he needs to go back. That he's not, that Nivellen is not in love with a woman. He's in love with a creature, you know?
Yeah.
And I think he even they kind of talk about her, and he suspects that it's something else, some kind of like water nymph creature or something, because they like animals or beasts or something, and they kind of just dismiss it. But then he starts thinking about it, and he realizes that it's something else. So when he goes back and sees her name is Verena. And I think he asks her, he goes, "Are you this?" I lost that part in the book, man. I thought I saved that. Do you remember that part? He's like,
oh yeah, he lists off a whole bunch of things that she could potentially be.
Yeah, and she's just like kind of doing this creepy kind of like song she's humming.
Yeah, very creepy.
But he eventually realizes she's a Bruxa, which is a vampire. But it's a vampire with telepathic abilities. And I thought this bit of writing here where he was fighting her was really cool.
It was, yeah. Definitely.
Like he's doing the signs and he's dodging out of the way just in time. You know, she gets him a couple of times and hits him and cuts him. And she actually gets the drop on him. And it's not until Nivellen kind of comes up behind her and like stabs her with a pole. Like impales her, you know, and it's kind of like creeping towards him. The way I imagine it is like she's sliding down the pole, like as it's going through her body to get closer to Nivellen, and basically tells him that she loves him.
Yeah, which is crazy. You don't really. I wasn't really expecting that whole idea of the vampire actually falling in love with the creature that she's feeding off of.
Right. And Geralt finally gets the killing blow. Doesn't he chop her head off, I think?
Yeah.
And that breaks the curse, and it turns Nivellen back into a human.
Did you listen to the part where he turns back into a human? Did you get that far?
No, I didn't hear that part.
That part, right? That's the part that I kind of teased before. Was amazing the way the narrator did it. He started out slurring his speech like he had tusks, and as he was talking through the lines, kind of cleared his voice up throughout the thing to where he then started just talking normally, and it was like you could almost see the transformation taking place in just the way the guy's voice was. It was really neat, like the way the guy did it.
Yeah, he's doing a performance. He's not just reading the book, he's performing, which is awesome.
And a lot of times like that, like sometimes that gets old, you know, like sometimes it really depends on the person who's doing the narration. They have to be a really good actor, or that just kind of eventually gets irritating. But he crushed it.
So basically the curse was that Nivellen could only break the curse if he killed a creature. He killed someone who loved him. Like, someone who loved him would have to die to break the curse, and that's basically what happened. And luckily, she was a vampire.
Yeah, everything works out great in the end. Awesome.
Yeah. I mean, what is it about Nivellen? Is he a good guy or a bad guy? I don't know. He seemed to have done something really bad, but it's kind of like,
Yeah, I think he was just kind of like before he was a bad guy. He wasn't even necessarily a bad guy. He was a weak guy. He was talking about how, he just kind of went along with what the gang members wanted him to do. He had rotten teeth. He just was always getting sick. He was just kind of just a very weak, physically and weak-minded person. And through this whole transformation and living as the Beast, kind of redeemed himself a little bit and actually became more human as the Beast. Jason.
Oh yeah, I like that.
Yeah, very deep.
Nice. There's an interesting chapter. After this story, then it goes back to the Voice of Reason, where there's a part where it's just Geralt, and he's saying, "Let's talk, Yola," and he's doing all the talking, and she doesn't say anything. So he's telling her about himself, and he basically says that I carry 2 swords, one iron and one silver. Silver for the monsters, but also I could use the iron for certain creatures too. But he said that I carry 2, every Witcher does. It's said, spitefully, the silver one is for monsters and the iron for humans, but that's wrong, and there are monsters which can be struck down only with a silver blade. So are those for whom iron is lethal. And Yola, not just any iron, it must come from a meteorite. What is a meteorite, you ask? And he tells her what a meteorite is. And then he says that he came from Kaer Morhen, a Witcher settlement, and it was a fortress, but not much remains of it. I think it's cool that he kind of gives a little bit of backstory here, and then he says that I underwent the usual mutation there through the trial of grasses, hormones, herbs, viral infections, and then through them all again, and to the bitter end. Apparently, I took the changes unusually well. I was only ill briefly. I was considered to be exceptionally resilient brat and was chosen for more complicated experiments as a result. There were worse, much worse, as you see. I survived. The only one to live out all chosen for further trials, and his hair has been white ever since. I thought that was kind of a cool backstory there.
Oh yeah, it's awesome. And what interests me is that, like, having not read the books the way they were originally released, I'm wondering if that's the first time you really get a glimpse into his backstory.
Yeah, that would be interesting. I'd like to see this place. And I mean, they kind of talk about it now, like there aren't as many monsters as there used to be, but really I think there are, but people are kind of fooling themselves.
Yeah, but seems like he's got no end of work.
The world must have been really filled with monsters and horrible things for them to say, okay, we need to start a place where we just create guys who kill monsters.
Well, the what I found interesting about that whole part was early on, they kind of ask him about him being human, and he's kind of like, not necessarily, basically by becoming a Witcher, it kind of nullifies his humanity in a way. And I just was kind of wondering why that was. And in this, I guess somehow in the change, like he's become something else. Right.
He's like, superhuman, I guess.
I guess I just don't understand why that wouldn't, why it would nullify him, like his humanity. If that makes sense.
I think immediately he talks about people when they see he's a Witcher. A lot of people are immediately afraid or hate him, so they treat him differently. And he had to learn to kind of accept how people treat him and just kind of make his way through the world that way. People, he rides from town to town and sees if anyone needs his service. He sees on the board Witcher needed. A lot of times they just throw him his money and want him to leave immediately. And I think maybe the reason he kind of says I'm no longer human is because humans don't treat him like he's human anymore.
I see. Yeah, that makes sense.
They kind of treat him like shit.
Yeah, exactly. I also love the speech that he does with Yala, where he's just basically kind of revealing how he thinks, because when he talks about the meteor, he's saying, some people see this as a religious artifact, or something from the gods. I just see it as a piece of stone that fell to earth. And so it's really like a great glimpse into the character and kind of who we're going to be dealing with as we go throughout the rest of these books.
Right. He's like a no-nonsense guy. He's very skeptical, it seems like, even though he deals with some outrageous shit, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
And he keeps telling Nenica that he doesn't believe in destiny. Like, there's no destiny for me. It's just, I'm, going to do what I'm supposed to do, and that's it. But she's like, no, I don't think it's like that. And we'll deal with destiny in a little bit more. The next story is The Lesser Evil. And they mentioned the Butcher of Blaviken in the first chapter, I believe, The Witcher. Butcher of Blaviken. And you're like, what does that mean? And this is the chapter where we find out what the Butcher of Blaviken is. And why he's called that. And I thought it was cool because it says he rides into town with a Kikimora on his horse, or he's pulling a Kikimora. And describes it as like part alligator, part spider. Sounds pretty damn gross and scary.
Yeah.
I wouldn't want to deal with a Kikimora. And he's trying to sell, like, who will pay me for I killed this? Is anybody going to give me money? And nobody wants to give him money for doing it. And they're like, he meets this guy, what is his name? Caldemain? The alderman.
Yeah.
He seems
Caldemain,
to like Geralt. He takes a liking.
You got it. Wait a minute. You got one. Like, exactly how he pronounces it in the book. You did it.
Yes. Caldemain. Maybe I cheated and heard that part. Now, they take him, they say, maybe the town wizard would like to give you money for this Kikimora. And he's like, well, I can't think of any potions or elixirs that are made from Kikimora, but okay, we'll try it out. And when he gets there, it turns out to be a wizard that he's met before, and he doesn't particularly like him, named Stregobor.
Yeah, Stregobor, like that. I know I keep saying so-and-so is my favorite character, but I love the way he's just kind of a dirtbag. Yeah. Like he's just, he's not at all what you'd expect a wizard to be. Like he's just kind of like a, not necessarily a con artist because he has powers, but he's just a very scummy individual.
He doesn't seem to have much empathy.
No, not at all.
And what it seems like is most towns have a town wizard who works for the king, or he has the ear of the king and he suggests things or whatever. Apparently their wizard died not long ago, and Stregobor showed up and kind of took over his tower, and now he lives there. When Geralt goes inside, he made it look like this beautiful like rainbow, and it looks like this kind of I don't know what you say, just like this paradise, right? It's like an illusion, and there's even a naked woman like with fruit and stuff. And there's a part where he's like, and you could even, basically saying, you could even sleep with that. And he's like, Geralt goes, maybe later. I just thought that was funny. And basically he says that I actually need your help, Witcher. And he's like, what would you need my help for, sorcerer? And he basically says that there's a monster worse than any Kikimora, and it's going to kill him tomorrow. And he explains, he talks to him about the Shrike, Renfrey the Shrike, this woman who's this kind of got into some weird stuff. Like, I had to go through this again. Like,
yeah, it was there was a lot going on in this conversation between the two of them. And it's actually a lot of really important stuff, I think, when it comes to what's going on. And another, like, I think it's another issue of this is probably answering a lot of questions that you would have had you read the other books first. So I think that's why it might have made a little bit more sense then. Like, he has the... when they call him the Butcher of Blaviken, imagine reading that in a later book going, what happened? What happened? Yeah, exactly.
So we find, it's cool that we're finding out now. So when people call him that later.
Yeah, definitely. We'll
what I
know.
think is funny is he's famous for this. And
for being the Butcher of Blaviken?
Yeah, and I have an epiphany later of why he's famous for this and how it got around, and I'll tell you that when we get there.
Okay.
But basically, long ago, there was a an eclipse, and they called it the Curse of the Black Sun, where the eclipse actually caused the women young girls, newly born girls, to be part beast or something. Some kind of thing in their brain that caused them to be evil. And Stregobor, I don't know if it was him particularly who ordered this, but they were killing these babies.
Yeah, it seems like there's like a wizard council that decided to do this.
And of course, Geralt thought this was all bullshit, and he thought it was terrible that they were killing a bunch of babies for no reason. It was just their superstition.
Well, yeah, because for him it was, since like we've established, he's a very skeptical guy. He just kind of saw the whole eclipse as just an eclipse, as just something that happened. And these people, all of the justification that Stregobor gives him for why they were doing what they were doing to these poor women, like it all kind of ties back to this eclipse, and he's just not buying it.
Right. So it turns out like this girl, Renfri, she was the daughter of this king who had a stepmother, and the stepmother didn't want this girl who could possibly be part demon or something, part monster, to ever gain control of the throne. So she wanted Stregobor to basically have her killed, right?
Yeah.
And so I don't think, I'm trying to remember, he doesn't want to do that. She actually gets a man, like a guard or something, to take her out, and he's gonna rape her, but instead Renfri stabs him in the ear.
Well, don't we find out about the reason why they wanted to get rid of her? I believe was because of the magic mirror showing the future of the kingdom. I believe
there's kind of some Snow White shit here.
Definitely, yeah, definitely. This story was when I finally realized, like, oh, hey, he's playing on actual fairy tales, and it's not just me thinking the Beauty and the Beast thing was a coincidence. This was when I actually kind of got on board.
Because when Renfri gets away, she ends up living with 7 gnomes.
7 gnomes, yeah.
Yeah, and eventually she catches up with Stregobor, and he casts a spell that encases her in crystal and buries her alive in this crystal until later on a prince or a king find her and dig her up, and the king, I think he said he had her splayed out nude and he was going to torture her, but the son actually kills him and he frees her and she becomes his princess. It's just all this crazy stuff, but she has sworn that she will get her revenge on Stregobor no matter what. Renfri will. Mm-hmm. And so now she's kind of like, she's royalty. She runs with this band of soldiers or mercenaries, would you call them?
Yeah.
And they're
sellswords.
Yeah, they're in town. They're in Blaviken to kill Stregobor. So now Stregobor is like telling Geralt, please, like, don't let them kill me. If you could kill her first, she's much worse than any Kikimora. So he's like, well, I'll see about this. So
I love how he tries to manipulate him through friendship. Like, you can very clearly tell that they don't like each other. But he's like, hey, man, I thought you were my friend. And he's like, I'm not your friend. You tried to have me killed.
And then when he goes to town, Caldemene's like, hey, we can't really do anything. She has like this paper from the king saying that she's free to do what she pleases as long as she doesn't break any laws or anything. We can't really do anything. So we can't kick her out of town.
So do you think that he obviously knew Caldermane before he came to town, right?
Yeah, that's what I believe. Like, he's passed through these different places throughout his adventures before.
Because you could tell that Labusha, Caldermane's wife, does not like him because bad stuff always happens when he comes around.
Right.
So that's one of the things that I liked about this whole story, was that it kind of was expanding the universe a little bit to bring in characters that weren't just the ones that we were seeing at Nenica or at the Temple of Melitala. It actually kind of brings in, like, it expands the universe, like I was saying a little bit.
Yeah, I think it's cool. I've looked at a map and I can't make heads or tails of it, but
yeah,
where are all these places? But I love the bit where he talks to the Renfri's men. There's like this pair of twins. There's this half-elf guy. And they basically want to fight him immediately, but Renfri shows up and she wants to talk to Geralt. And basically says that, she just wants to kill Stregobor and she'll leave town. Nobody has to get hurt or whatever. And she even describes Stregobor as worse than any monster. Also, the same way he described her.
And he kind of is. Like he's pretty horrible. When I don't want to get too far ahead of it, but she brings up the whole idea of the Tdem ultimatum.
Yeah, basically, or I think it's Caldamine mentions that later, that those men were basically, they demanded their brothers be set free from prison. They hijacked a ferry, and they said, free our brothers from prison, or we'll kill these people, one at a time. So they started killing them, one at a time, and finally they gave in and gave them, but not until they killed way too many of these innocent people. And the guy who was responsible for turning the men over basically said, I tried to go with the lesser evil, just freeing the men instead of seeing more people die. And they're like, well, you took way too long to do that.
Yeah.
You should have just opened fire on them and had some innocent people accidentally been killed. It would have been better than what you did. And that's when, after Geralt, I think doesn't he sleep with Renfri?
Yeah, she shows up. It's very abrupt. Like they get into this argument, and we're talking about how he's not going to basically turn Stregobor over to her, and then immediately, like, he leaves, and immediately she shows up in his bedroom and tries to reason with him a little bit more there.
Yeah, she's trying to get him to, like, just get Stregobor out of the tower and we'll take care of the rest. You don't have to do anything else and all will be fine.
Well, it's funny because people are constantly asking Geralt to, like, they basically view him as like a hired killer. And he's like, that's not what I do for a living. This is not at all my job. But everybody just wants him to basically be an assassin.
He even kind of questions her, like, to see if maybe she's got some kind of curse or monster in her. And she's like, well, I have done monstrous things, but she doesn't seem like she's outright evil or anything. She seems human, right?
Well, she seems like she's had just, like, the worst road ever to get to where she's at. I mean, it wasn't her fault that she had the ability to have premonitions or whatever, and is just treated horribly by her stepmother and then the huntsman. And, they even kind of alluded to the idea that she had to sleep with the gnomes, I believe. So she's just kind of had...
like, when she wouldn't sleep with her husband, he would beat her into submission, basically. It was just really terrible stuff.
Yeah, so, like, she does definitely seem like a bit of a monster in her actions now, but you can see, well, why she operates the way that she does.
Right, and so there's this festival that's going to happen the next day, and that's when they're going to kill Stregobor. And Geralt figures out, because of the ultimatum story, that they're going to actually start killing people at the festival until Stregobor leaves his tower. And then, but Geralt realizes that Stregobor is never going to leave his tower.
Never going to leave. Yeah, exactly. He doesn't care.
He doesn't care, so he needs to go just stop them. And that's when basically he kills each of them one at a time. And then eventually has to kill Renfri.
So that's why he became the Butcher of Blaviken, right? Because the way it looked was that he killed all these people completely unprovoked, I guess?
Yeah, I guess the townspeople were there for a festival. He shows up, and he just starts murdering these guys, then fights a woman to the death, kills her.
Yeah, exactly.
They start throwing rocks at him, and they're like, they're telling him to leave until Caldamine tells him to stop. And then he says, don't ever come back here again. But not.
Well, and we kind of skipped over the whole idea that Renfri saw all this happening and that he was going to have to make a choice between her and Stregobor, and he wouldn't know which was the right choice. You remember that part where she has the vision of him, like, and the flagstones are covered in blood, and and he won't know which one to choose, and he'll never know if he made the right choice. And that choice that they're talking about is like, was she basically saying that she would love him if he chose her?
I think so. Because I think at that moment, he does feel like he's not sure he made the right choice at all. And Striga comes out and he's like, "Oh, I need to perform an autopsy to prove that I was always right about her." And he's like, "Don't touch her."
Yeah. And I think, I don't know, that whole thing, like, it's interesting because it kind of plays into, I don't want to get into the Yennefer stuff at all yet, but like it kind of plays into his decision ultimately with what he did with Yennefer at the end. Just kind of this whole idea of him maybe finding somebody that actually loved him, or somebody he could love, but him choosing not to, him choosing to kill her instead is, I don't know, it kind of plays on the main theme of the entire book a little bit, in that all of these stories are stories of kind of perverted love. Yeah. I don't know. I haven't completely worked all that out in my mind yet as to what all that means, but I know there's definitely a connection there.
Stregobor even talks about evil and like the lesser evil or the worst kind of evil, and Geralt's just like, it's just evil. There's no like better or worse kind. It's just evil. But I wonder if like after this moment, he's just like, maybe he chose the wrong thing. And
yeah, definitely. I think he did. I mean, but he didn't really have a choice. I mean, they're there, like, he comes down the street to try to protect everyone. They shoot a crossbow at him, and then he goes into fighting mode. And, like,
whenever there's any action, he seems to handle himself very well.
Yeah, I love how when he's fighting those guys, it talks about him basically circling them, and getting a little bit closer every time he circles them until one of them kind of breaks formation, and he's able to slaughter them one by one. It was, I love the way he handles himself in fights.
Now, the next story, A Question of Price. It begins with Geralt with a razor to his throat where he's getting shaved, and he's taking a bath in Sintra. And he's the guest of Queen Calanthe.
Yeah, that's pretty close. Calanthe is how...
Calanthe? Okay, that sounds good. She's the lioness of Sintra, and she needs him there, but he has no idea why. And he's kind of annoyed, like, she better not have me here to kill somebody, because that's not what I do.
Yeah, exactly.
And I love I forget the guy's name, but he's like the assistant guy. He's like, come on, this way, we need you in here. And he's like, wait, why am I here? But basically, the queen's daughter is 15, kind of gross, that she's being shopped to suitors of... but that's the way it is at this time, right?
Hey, it's a completely different world, right?
Yeah.
You can't judge.
I love that there's a guy named Mousesack, first of all.
Mousesack, yeah.
And he's he's got some abilities. Is he a wizard, or is he...
I think he's a druid.
Oh, okay. And he's got an eye on Geralt, just kind of eyeing him the whole time. And he's so Geralt is there at the table with these men, these loud guys, and they have crazy names. Like, this chapter, I was like, dude, these names are killing me, man. There's the Crack and Crete. I thought that was two people for the longest time. Yeah. I thought it was like one guy, like twins, like one guy named Crack and another one named Crete, but apparently that's one dude. I did not pick up on that. Yeah. Cuckoo-Dak
Cuckoo-Dak or something like that.
So she's invited Lord Ravix of Forehorn and all these guys, and they're there to meet the princess. And Geralt's kind of like, he seems kind of impatient too, and he's kind of questioning the queen. She's getting pretty annoyed with him at the same time.
He's not giving her the respect that she's used to. She's used to basically people succumbing to her every whim, and he's just not that type of person at all. And she doesn't necessarily like it all that much.
She also seems very demanding, too.
Yes, incredibly demanding. Kind of hard to live with.
And he also notices his sword is kind of hidden behind her chair, like strapped to the back of it. And he's like, this is interesting. She has me here to kill someone. I just know it. Well, what we figure out is that she knows that something's going to happen, and that long ago, her husband, his life was saved by this man. And I think the law of surprise is very interesting.
Yeah, very, very interesting. Kind of hard to get at first.
And basically, when you save somebody's life, you're owed something by the man. I owe you my life. What can I give you? And it's like, you need to give me what you were not expecting when you arrive home. That's what you owe me, or whatever. So the king, Rogner, Calanthe's husband, he arrived home to see that she had given birth to their daughter. So he was surprised. So he owes this man his daughter, which is really messed up.
So here's a question that I was wondering, maybe if you could if you understood it a little better than I did. Did he ask that request to invoke the law of surprise, or he just kind of asked for a very random thing?
Like, hey, we got a new stereo. Damn, I got to give this to this guy.
Yeah, exactly.
I thought the same thing. Like, hey, check this out. New HD TV, man.
Yeah, you get there and it's like, oh, man, we got all new dishes. Like, oh, I guess I got to give these to that dude. Here's your dishes, bro. Yeah,
like, the same thing.
Yeah.
Like, how did you not know your wife was pregnant, dude? Come on. It takes 9 months.
Yeah, exactly. Well, she said, like, well, that's the thing is maybe he did know. Like, the king did know. I don't want to get into it because I don't want to spoil your explanation. But
he was just surprised that she'd given birth while he was gone.
Exactly. Like, apparently he couldn't count to 9.
And couldn't you lie about it? Like, hey, yeah, we got this table, so here you go.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, no. Didn't your wife just give birth?
Here's this 15-year-old table we got you.
Yeah. Enjoy.
Yeah, it was a gift my wife got me for coming home.
Yeah, I love this guy shows up in armor. First of all, there's all this great conversation going on. The queen wants her to marry this guy of Skellige to kind of have like to unite and be at peace with them, so they kind of protect them in Sintra, kind of a thing. And so what you figure out, the reason she wants Geralt there is because she knows this dude's going to show up and claim her daughter. And I think she wanted Geralt to basically kill him, didn't she?
Yeah.
She gets whatever she wants, and she's not going to let this stranger take her daughter, which I don't blame her. Like,
no, definitely not.
She even is like, do I not get any say in this, or does my husband, because of what he did, like, I have to give up my daughter now? And he's like, I'm sorry. So when she says, I'm not going to do it, the men at the table are like, whoa, hey, if we can't hold you to your word for this, how can we trust you in anything else? So she realized she's kind of pressured into doing it, right?
Yeah, pretty much. Because if she doesn't do it, it's going to basically destroy her word as queen. Like,
you can't hold her to her word. She wouldn't even give her daughter to this guy, and her husband promised him. So she realizes, like, and then Geralt says, well, actually, there's a little stipulation here in this law of surprise, and that is she must go willingly. And she's like, oh, okay. So she asks her daughter, would you be willing to go with this man? And she's like, yes. And she's like, what?
Well, that's one of the reasons why, what I was talking about before with the king maybe possibly knowing about the whole law of surprise thing, because she was saying that she figured that the daughter would never actually agree to it.
Right. And she does. Because you learn in a bit that she's actually been seeing him for a while now. Now, is this a kind of... he takes his mask off early before midnight, right? Like, at midnight, he turns normal, right? Is that what they're...
Yeah, apparently from midnight till dawn, he's a normal person, and then during the day, he is that creature.
He's like a porcupine man.
Exactly. But the queen paid somebody to ring the bell a little bit early so he would take his helmet off
and kind of repulse her
before.
daughter.
She definitely knew a lot about this guy and what was going on.
So
but she didn't know that he was coming in every night and wooing her daughter.
Right, and so when he takes off his mask, she expects her daughter to be kind of shocked by it, but she's not really, because she's in love with him, apparently. But that we're not supposed to know that yet, because basically when they start attacking him, what is his name, by the way? Urcheon?
Erkion.
Erkion. When the men start attacking him, she freaks out, the princess, and she releases this kind of like energy power. And what's funny is because they kind of describe it as the Force, but it's like a force of nature. And I was like, hey, George Lucas might be suing somebody here.
Yeah. No, they didn't talk at all about metachlorians, so I think we're okay.
But
we're all right.
She apparently has this pure primordial force. And
it was like Geralt and Malsac could kind of feel it in the air.
Yeah,
a little bit. They're like, there's some sort of like static electricity going on to where they could feel something in the background that wasn't going to be going to be good.
Remember, Malsac is spelling out in crumbs on the table like trouble, be careful, kind of a thing to Geralt.
Yeah,
and his necklace is kind of his medallion, so they know something's up. And so she's released this power, and I think, doesn't Geralt say like a virgin wouldn't have this kind of powers or something? She wouldn't have.
Oh yeah, definitely.
So basically,
I forgot about that part.
He's basically like, hey, she's had sex or something. I thought was interesting, but who has she had sex with? And he figures out it must be Erkion. And so he goes to defend him and pull guys off of him. And even one guy gets a good stab under his breastplate.
Yeah, it's I guess he was trying to kind of lessen the impact of the primordial force or get her to calm down. And the only way he was going to do that was by protecting the guy he was there initially to supposedly kill. And everybody, like other people, started defending him.
Yeah, she kept calling him Dooney.
Yeah.
And it turns out that's his name, I guess. And was it Malsac who calmed her down with a spell, or kind of like chilled her out or something?
Yeah, I forget what he actually did. I thought he like jumped on her or something like that, but I could be completely wrong. There was so much going on in that story that it's a little hazy as to how she stopped her primordial force.
So basically you find out that they've actually been together for over a year now, secretly, and they've fallen in love. And Calanthe has finally accepted their love, and that she will allow them to get married. And I think, is that what breaks the curse and he turns back to normal?
Yeah, it is. Because she chose to go with him, or to be with him. It's kind of the only love story in this whole like series of love stories that has like a real happy ending.
Right, and Dooney says, "You saved my life, Geralt. They were going to kill me." And he's like, "Can we give you an award, a reward of some kind?" And Calanthe, is wearing this sash, and he goes, "I'll take your sash." And so she gives him the sash. Like, what is he going to do with that?
Yeah, exactly.
And Dooney's like,
well,
no.
She gives him. He asks for the sash, but she gives him some sort of like emerald necklace instead. I guess.
Right. That's right. Oh, and another thing is they talk about the law of surprise, and Malsac kind of says Geralt himself was a child of surprise, as are all Witchers. Did you catch that?
It really gets into kind of the reason why there are so few Witchers. I guess like the stars really have to align in order for somebody to be eligible.
A child of destiny.
Yeah, a child born of destiny, which is interesting because like Geralt kind of says that he doesn't believe in destiny, but here he's really, his entire order is founded on the idea of a child being born under destiny. So it kind of leads me to believe that he does believe in destiny. He just doesn't like what is supposed to happen in his future, so he doesn't want to believe it.
Yeah, he's in denial, basically.
Exactly.
What it figures out. And so Dooney Dunny offers him something, and he's like, Geralt asks for that which he has but does not know, and it turns out that Pavetta is pregnant. So basically, Geralt's been promised their child to raise as a Witcher. How screwed up is that?
Yeah. I was expecting them to be a little bit more upset by that, but here he is talking, about a Witcher is the it's a profession to be respected. It kind of changed everybody's view on what a Witcher was, and then he goes and asks that the prince or princess becomes a Witcher. I was expecting them to be like, "Well, hold on, buddy. Okay, let's slow down just a little bit." It
felt like they were like, wait, you're pregnant? And she's like, yes. And they're like, oh, good time.
Do. And then, the scene ends, And
Geralt's like, well, I'll be back in 5 years, maybe? I don't know. Whenever.
Yeah, I'm wondering if one of the stories in the books, touches on that. About him hopefully trying to go back or having an apprentice or something like that. It's funny. I was thinking about this. What's that?
I said I already know some spoilers there.
Oh no, okay. It's funny because I was thinking about recording this podcast. I have so many theories in my head of what could potentially happen, but I don't want to come off you remember the Lost theories that everybody had?
Oh yeah.
Where it was one of my favorites that you were talking about was nanobots.
Yep, it's nanobots.
Yeah, when you go back and after you actually know what's going on, you sound so stupid. Yeah. But I've got so many theories of what it could be. I just don't want to, listen back to this and be like, "Oh, you're such an idiot."
Well, that's cool that you're not spoiled because I kind of, in a roundabout way, am spoiled.
How did you get spoiled?
The Netflix trailer. Games. Kind of just knowing a little bit, characters' names and stuff like that, here and there. I've kind of pieced it together, you know what I'm saying?
Gotcha. But see, they're all theories,
Yeah. I thought that was an interesting story there. And we got to learn the law of surprise, and that's how things work in this world, apparently, which is kind of screwed up, man.
Yeah, it's like I said, it's one of the stories that actually ended up kind of hopeful. And good, which was, a bit of a departure from the ones that we read before, but, I liked it.
The fact that the queen is like, okay, I accept him, you love him, and I was just like, oh, wow, okay.
Yeah. Yeah, she seemed to kind of turn on a dime a little bit, but when your daughter has the ability to launch a table in the air, I don't think it gives you very many options.
Oh, that's another thing that we should take from this, that the daughter is very powerful in the force of nature or whatever.
Well, and she kind of is playing into the whole thing that Stregobor was talking about when it was these women that have these unnatural abilities. That just kind of came out of nowhere. I think she ends up being one of those type of people, just kind of like Yala is and Renfrey was. Do you think it's the same type of thing going on between all of them?
I don't know. There are sorceresses, right? But they're not necessarily born with powers if they taught them.
Yeah, this seems like something different than a sorceress, though.
Yeah.
It's like this person has the ability to tell the future and have premonitions and everything like that, but not necessarily taught,
Yeah, I like that kind of force of nature. There's some kind of natural gift they're given at birth or something.
Yeah, I'm wondering if she was one because they all seem roughly, well, no, because I was thinking that it had to do with the eclipse that Stregobor was talking about, but this Princess Pavetta or whatever was much younger than Renfrey, if I'm correct.
Right. Yeah, I don't know. I think maybe we're going to learn more later.
It's nanobots, dude.
I know. We don't want to say it, but that's what it is.
It's always nanobots.
Now, before we get to the edge of the world, I want to say we're going to meet a character named Dandelion.
Dandelion?
Or as the narrator of the book calls him, Dandelion.
Yeah. Did you think it was Dandelion the entire time?
As I read the book, I was like, oh, this dude's name is Dandelion. That's weird.
Does that, finding out that it's Dandelion, did it change your opinion, or not your opinion, but your perception of the character at all? Just by the name, or no?
I don't know. I mean, I actually was in denial. I was like, no, it's Dandelion.
I kind of like it as Dandelion better.
Like I looked up Dandelion, like what the flower, it's Dandelion. It's spelled the same way. But the guy decided to name him Dandelion.
Dandelion, yeah. Exactly.
And first of all, Geralt has a best friend, and his name is Dandelion, or Dandelion. And he's a bard poet. He's a singer, he carries a lute, and he performs songs. And now here is my kind of it kind of slapped me in the head, was like, that's why the Butcher of Blaviken is known throughout the land, because friggin' Dandelion has been singing about him from town to town.
Oh, that makes sense.
For years, about the Butcher of Blaviken. I bet he has a song about him.
Yeah, that's true. I didn't really think about that. But it's not something that Geralt is, very proud of, though, right?
No, not at all. But I think even in that early story, a guy accused him of liking that he had a reputation when he showed up somewhere, that people were...
Oh, yeah, it's true.
I love that when Neneka doesn't really like him...
How did you feel about him as a character? Like, what was your opinion of him?
I liked him immediately just because I liked that there was someone around Geralt kind of driving him crazy. I thought it was kind of...
Yeah. Well, he's such a departure, in terms of personality than Geralt. And it's nice that he actually wants to be around somebody who's so light and kind of not serious.
Neneke says, he's the complete opposite of you. And he's like, opposites attract.
Yeah,
and I love,
yeah, exactly.
She says, your friend is here, your famous poet. And Geralt says, he really is a famous poet. Surely you're not going to claim you've never heard his ballads. I've heard them, yes indeed. Well, I don't know much about it, but maybe the ability to jump from touching lyricism to obscenities so easily is a talent. Never mind.
Yeah, he was a great character. Just kind of a... the comic relief to Geralt's stoicism. A lot of fun.
And in this story especially, but he says, my deepest respects, venerable mother. Praise be the great Melitele. How do you say it again?
Melitele.
The
that
great
is a mouthful.
Melitele and her priestesses, the springs of virtue and wisdom. And she says, stop talking bullshit and don't call me mother. Yeah. The very idea you could be my son fills me with horror. I just love that little bit there.
Yeah, not a big fan.
Yeah, she's not a big fan of Dandelion or Dandelion. I'm sorry.
I think she'd like him a little more if he was Dandelion.
Dandelion. What's funny is I looked up, because I had to know this, in the Polish books, he's known as Jaskier or something like that. I don't know how you pronounce that either, but it said it means buttercup.
Really?
I think is hilarious. What if his name instead of Dandelion was Buttercup?
Well, that totally changes the story a little bit. I wonder if Andrzej, whatever his name is, decided on what his name should be for the American version or the English version.
I don't know.
That's kind of an interesting choice. I wonder if it was the translator who decided that, because you could very well name him Buttercup or Buttercup or something like that, Buttercup. And it would. I guess it would still work.
But what I had read is people were asking the producer of the show, the showrunner of the Netflix show, we've looked at the cast list and we don't see Dandelion. Please tell me he's going to be in the show. And she's like, oh, yes, he's there, but we're going by his Polish name, which is Jaskier. And they're like, oh, okay.
Got it.
He's Buttercup.
There you go. Yeah, exactly.
So this story is called The Edge of the World, and it's about... it starts with basically Geralt talking about the times of The Witcher coming to an end. He can't find monsters anywhere to kill, or no one will pay him. There's a troll he will kill the troll at this bridge, but they're like, no, he keeps the bridge in working order. He makes sure everything's working properly. We need that troll there. And he's like, let me kill that dragon, or what do you call it, a fork tail. And they're like, no, the king's daughter loves him, and we need to keep him here. Everyone loves seeing him fly through the air. And he's like, okay, well, I can't kill him.
I love the part with the troll, because he's like, well, I mean, you kill the troll, who's going to fix the bridge?
Yeah. It's like, we need the troll. And can I just keep calling him Dandelion?
That's fine. I like it. I dig it.
So Dandelion is like, oh, quit feeling sorry for yourself. Just become a priest or something.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, it's like the times are changing. You're not really needed anymore, Geralt. Like everybody's just kind of, they're just kind of going with the times now. The trolls are fixing the bridges, and we're loving the dragons because they're nostalgic. We don't really need you anymore.
Right. And as I said before, I think that people are just fooling themselves. There actually are plenty. What's funny is a lot of these stories where there's some kind of monster, there's much more than that. There's like a guy may appear to be a monster, but he's actually cursed because of some reason, you know? Or there may be like these wild creatures in the woods and stuff, like Kikimora, which can be a nuisance, but the real monsters are people like Stregobor, who are a sorcerer that manipulates things his way and stuff. So I think that's, you know, not everything's as simple as it seems. And just like these people who say that, by the way, this bit was hilarious when they go to the edge of the world. What was the place called? Dol Blathana? At the edge of the world, where this beautiful place where it's ripe with lots of crops and harvest and everything. And it used to be elven country, but they've all moved into the hills. And him and Dandelion are there to, you know, see if there's any creatures or whatever. And they're not. They're kind of dismissed. And, well, a lot of them talk, well, I saw this there and this there. And then Dandelion's like, see, there's plenty of work here. And Geralt's like, no, there's not. They're all just making this stuff up. Or they just heard these rumors. It's all just bullshit. And he's like,
yeah. It's interesting that, like, what's true, like what's an actual creature and what's not, because in my mind it's like, well, they all seem like they would exist in this world, but there's a distinction between, yes, some of these exist, they're actual things I've seen, and other ones are not.
Yeah, and I guess Geralt's been around long enough where he's gone on a few wild goose chases, you know, like, there's nothing here. What the hell are these people talking about? And he says that the reason people make up stories of monsters is because they seem less monstrous themselves. The man that goes home at night drunken and beats his wife, and he tells the story of something that he's much less worse now. And Dandelion's like, oh, I must sing a song about this. Until when they're riding to town and this guy comes up behind them and he must tell them about a problem they have. And so they go to his small village and he tells them that they're being harassed by a Diovel.
So it was spelled, how was it spelled in the book? Because that was one of the questions I had for you.
It's spelled Deovel, a Diovel.
Okay, so yeah, because the way he was pronouncing it, it was Diovel, but I wasn't sure if like that was just the accent the narrator was putting on the guy, and it was just devil.
Well, remember these people talk really weird, kind of like Yoda or something. And at one point, Geralt starts talking like that, and Dandelion's like, "Whoa, be careful! You'll get stuck talking like that." Which is hilarious.
So all of that stuff was kind of spelled out phonetically, then, the way.
Yes. It's like.
Oh, okay. I wasn't sure about that or not.
Diovel, and immediately they're talking about a devil. And Geralt's like, there's no such thing as a devil. And he's like, no, it's a Diovel. And Dandelion is just cracking up the entire time, just making fun of them. And Geralt has to tell him to shut up several times. Like, shut up. So he's like, I will investigate this Diovel. And it's actually a hilarious moment when they first go out there. And he figures out he's a Sylvan. He's like this goat man.
Yeah, I think probably my favorite character. I know I've said that a lot, but he was so. This is not what I was expecting.
Yeah, And apparently they said that this devil, he likes to steal things, he likes to play tricks and harass people. And
it sounds like he's just kind of a jerk.
He's annoying. He's annoying the shit out of them, basically.
Yeah, exactly.
So when they get there and they kind of approach him, he starts chucking like these BBs at them, these iron balls at their heads.
He's like, I got your balls right here.
And I think it's funny because he hits Dandelion and Geralt, and they just run away. And they immediately feel really foolish running away from the Devil Man.
But he's not at all what you'd expect, because he's just like kind of irritated and pissed off that they're there.
Yeah, I forget what
and instead of like casting some spell, he just throws stuff at him.
He's like saying like "bah" or like yelling at them.
Yeah.
And so they go back and they're like, well, "Tell us, why is he so agitated?" And they're like, "Well, we read in this book that how to get rid of him, and we replaced the blueberries with iron balls so he'd break his teeth." And I thought it was hilarious.
Yeah, that whole plan of you give him pine tar instead of giving him cheese. Like, it was such a long, drawn-out, ridiculous plan that apparently didn't work, but it was pretty hilarious.
There's like this ancient book they have. It's like a monster's almanac or something, and they have an old woman who deciphers things for them. And she has like this little young assistant who's going to take over for her. And Geralt's like, interesting. May I see this book? And it has stuff, and there have stuff about a witcher or a witch man.
Yeah. And it didn't have like nearly a very high opinion of the witch man.
Yeah, and it says, do not touch a witch man. You could come down with mange.
Yeah, that's right. I forgot about that.
Oh, and there's a great bit. It's like, do not pay him any more than like a half credit or something. I don't remember what it was, but it was like very little money. And Geralt's like, no, you're going to pay me way more than this.
Yeah, it was like a silver penny or 3 halves.
Yeah, and he's like, I don't think so. And it says something like, keep your women away because they're very sexual and they want to sleep with all the women.
Yeah.
And Dandelion thinks this is hilarious. It's like, oh, they've got you down. And so they figure out, he's a Sylvan. And I love the part when Geralt goes there alone and he wants to talk some sense into this Sylvan. And he's like, let me tell you a riddle.
He keeps challenging him to the stuff that Geralt is like not at all interested in.
Yeah, he's like, if you solve the riddle, then I'll leave. But if you don't get the riddle, I'm staying, and you have to leave. And he's like, race me to the other town. Whoever gets there first. And he's like, I'm not doing that. And he's like, okay. And he tells him the riddle, and he's like, do you have the answer? And he's like, no, I don't. And he like doesn't even think about it.
He doesn't even try. Yeah.
And I love there's a line where Geralt says, you're really starting to get on my nerves. And then he's like, I have a game for you. And he's like, oh, really? What is it? And he goes, don't do unto others what you would not have them do to you. And then he just like pelts him right in the head with an iron ball.
Yeah, and it just starts like trying to beat his ass.
Yeah, he just starts wrestling with him, trying to grab him, and he's like kicking Geralt in the head with his hooves. And there's it says like Geralt, at this moment, Geralt was pleased that no one was around to witness this.
Yeah,
because I just pictured him wrestling with a goat man, and it was hilarious.
Was this whole storyline like one of the ones you enjoyed the most?
Yes, it was very funny. A lot of the book is really funny.
It is, yeah, very funny.
There's like this dry humor throughout the entire book. Things are kind of amusing as you're reading them, and this was really amusing.
Yeah, I think the combination of having Dandelion and Torqua, who was the Sylvan, they made this probably my favorite.
You learn his name is Torqua, and Geralt hears someone riding up, and he thinks it's Dandelion, and it turns out it's not, and they knock him unconscious. It happens to be elves who live in the mountains. And there's one elf, this woman, and she really does not like him. It turns out the elves hate humans. And I kind of got a kind of Native American kind of thing here.
Yeah, definitely.
The elves were here first, and the humans learned what they could from them and then ran them off or killed them. And some elves have integrated into society, as we will learn in the next story. But other elves like them, they went to the hills and they lived. It turns out elves, we see in all kinds of lore, are in tune with nature, and the land provides to them. They don't really know how to farm and grow stuff. Stuff just grows for them, right? So it turns out they've recruited Torqua to take grain and stuff for them to grow their own food, I guess, to keep them alive. And
yeah.
It turns out...
it's interesting that, and I know I keep saying it's interesting a lot, sorry. What I found interesting was that, we have this whole Native American vibe in this story, but it's a Polish book.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering if we're just picking up on that because we're Americans, or if this guy actually intended that and is kind of giving us a commentary on what we thought of, or what he thinks about how we did that, or if that's just kind of a universal theme across the planet.
It's happened, all across the planet, where there was indigenous people somewhere and other people arrived and took from them.
Yeah.
Like the Aborigines in Australia or whatever. Mm-hmm. It happens everywhere, and it's terrible. But Geralt is basically saying, you don't have to do this. You could trade with them. And they're like, we'll trade with no humans. And they're like, oh, okay. And he's like, well, then you're fools. And he's like, you need to integrate with, with the humans. And they're like, we'll never do that, because they're filled with too much hate and rage for humans. And basically, I forget what the guy's name was, the elven leader. They're basically going to kill a Dandelion and Geralt. And he's trying to talk to Toruvil. Filavandrel is their
Filavandrel, yeah.
Toruvil is the female one that smashes Dandelion's lute.
Yeah.
He smashes his instrument. And he's basically saying that we will be up in the mountains. Eventually we'll be starving. We will decide to die with honor and ride to town and start a fight with the humans and die that way. And he basically says, we're not here to kill them now because they don't even have a guard posted sentry at night. They're just living here off the land, and they have no fear of anyone showing up taking it from them. And they're kind of disgusted by, they're living in this rich crop area on the edge of the world where the elves used to thrive, and now these humans are here. So they're kind of angry. And
Geralt's kind of telling them, look, the writing's on the wall. There are way more of us. You guys don't have the ability to produce crops. Your way of life is pretty much over. Sorry, you're going to have to deal with it. And they're we'd rather die than have to change the way we want to live.
Yeah, and he compares himself to them, and he goes, I'm not human. They treat me like a second-class citizen. I have to do it, and you could do it too. And they're just like, no, we won't. And so they're like, unfortunately, we need to kill you now. And that's when the forest being shows up.
Yeah. Well, before that, I love how, Geralt is saying, fine, kill me. Nobody cares about me, but let him go. He's trying to free his friend. But Dandelion, instead of being the coward that you expect him to be, is like, no. If you kill him, I'm coming after you.
Oh yeah, that's
which is kind of stupid, but also shows that he's a lot braver than you'd think he was.
Well, Filavandrel says he goes, "Don't kill my friend here. Just kill me. He's harmless. He's a bard or whatever. He's a musician, a poet." And he's like, "No, he shall. Once we kill you, he'll return to avenge you." And Dandelion's like, yes, I will. I'll come back. I'll kill you for my friend. And Geralt's like, shut up. He's just like, God, shut up. It's really funny. So this Queen of the Fields shows up. And the elves lower their weapons. They kneel before her because she's this magical creature, right? and it turns out she's speaking to them telepathically. And, oh, by the way, Torqua, he was defending Geralt and Dandelion, pleading with them not to kill them.
Yeah, he totally changes his opinion and care. Like, I part of me thought that was a little unjustified. Maybe he just doesn't want them to be murdered, but I don't understand where in that exchange would he have felt the need to ally himself with Geralt and Dandelion.
Right. And when the Queen of the Field shows up, Dandelion, he faints. And there's a moment where Torqua asks Geralt, what should I do with him? Because he's passed out, and Geralt says, slap him. And so Torqua starts slapping him in the face, which is hilarious. And so basically, Phil Evandrel, he frees them, and he says that they're letting them go. And Toraville gives Dandelion a new lute that's beautiful. This beautiful, like, ornate lute. And they part ways. And Geralt wants to know what she said to get them to do an about face. And basically that life renews itself.
Yeah.
Basically, like, things get better, I guess.
She gave them a little bit of hope, and in giving them that hope, that wasn't enough for them to kind of change their plans and head back into the mountains.
And he even says, promise me, Witcher, that the day I come back down from the mountain to meet my fate, that you'll be here. And Geralt says, I'll try, and that's pretty much
You think that's something that we're going to find out in books later?
Well, there's a book that has it's called The Blood of Elves, so I think that's
okay. Yeah.
And I was like,
it's called Philip Andrew's Revenge.
Yeah, I was like, oh shit, he's back. Yeah. Well, what's funny is the story ends with them around a campfire. It's Geralt, it's Dandelion, and Torqua around a campfire, and he's coming up with a song. And I just love that picture of them around a campfire. This goat man next to him.
I really hope that Torqua is like part of the crew,
So do I.
Later on.
I really was hoping he shows up again, because I love that he ended up being on their side,
Yeah. He's just a great character.
Yeah, he really is. I guess we should quickly talk about The Last Wish, because we're running out of time, big time. So
sounds good.
Let's do this, because finally we're going to learn something about Yennefer. This story begins hilariously with Dandelion and Geralt. I just go back and forth. Is that okay?
It's all good. No, it's totally fine. I kind of like it.
They're fishing for catfish.
Yeah.
Which is hilarious, just picturing them fishing for catfish.
Well, I love it. They're like arguing the entire time.
Yeah, about how to do it. And Geralt's like, how does a bard know how to fish or whatever? And basically getting on each other's nerves. And I love this interaction between them. I just think it's funny. And
well, I also love that he's like this giant, powerful witcher and this famous bard, but they're all like so down on their luck that they have to like resort to catching a fish and trying to sell its skin so they can make like enough money to get by for a while. Yeah,
it's really kind of sad, isn't it? And they find, I guess, a sealed vase.
Yeah, I think they said it's an amphora, which is like a big vase they used in Roman times to store stuff when they were shipping. And it's sealed, and immediately, which I think is funny, is Dandelion's like, "Oh, it's a djinn. There's a djinn inside the bottle. I get 3 wishes." Like he immediately knew exactly what it was. Yeah. And Geralt's like, "Oh, don't be silly. That's not what it is," or whatever. And his first wish is to kill this rival bard in another town. Yeah, I know. Which I think is hilarious. But he does uncork it, and this like a cloud of red mist comes out, and it is a friggin' genie, basically. Well, and that's when I texted you before, because in my mind I was trying to connect all of these stories back to their original like fairy tales,
Right.
that they were coming from. And so I was thinking, well, is Dandelion like a kind of a play on the name Aladdin? They kind of sound similar. But then I was like, well, DD, what other DD do I know that had to do with a genie? And so then I started thinking Daffy Duck when he found that genie, and Dandelion basically was acting like Daffy Duck in that one cartoon.
Yeah, he is, basically. He is Daffy Duck. Well, what's funny is the genie goes right for his throat before he can utter, you learn later that they want to keep you from, giving him a wish because they want to get away before they're your slave and have to grant your wishes, right?
Yeah, they're trying to escape to their own dimension.
Right, and we kind of learn all about genies here, or djinns, and it was very interesting, I thought, that they're like different genies of different elements, basically. I really should have reread this or written it down, but basically, there's earth, water, fire, and
wind.
Yeah, and wind. And if a sorcerer can basically enslave this genie, they can basically supercharge their powers and become omnipotent. Which sounds really badass, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
But you have to get the genie after it's granted the wishes, like when they're vulnerable. When they're under someone's spell of having to answer 3 wishes, you can't do anything with them.
Yeah, they can't be bottled if there's still unspent wishes out there.
Right. So there's this great moment where Geralt, he's like, this is a demon, I will do an exorcism. I've learned this ancient exorcism from a priest years ago. I will say this out loud. And he basically casts the genie away. So he's like, oh shit, that worked. Okay. And so he goes, and Dandelion, he's like bleeding from the mouth. He's really hurt badly. So he takes him to a local town where these elves are like, hey, you can't come in right now between dusk and dawn. Like, you can only come in the morning. So he's like, shit, what do I do now? Like, my friend is hurt. I need a sorcerer of some kind to help him. And they're like, well, nearby there's this one named Yennefer. You should go there. And that's when he goes to a town and finds Yennefer. Well, Yennefer has like she already has a
reputation.
Yeah, a bit of a reputation in this town. Like, people are calling her a whore and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And so he goes there to ask her help, and automatically she's like quite a character.
And, yeah, definitely. Definitely knows she's the smartest person in the room.
She's calling for apple juice, so he brings her apple juice.
Well, first he knocks out the guard to get up there, and threatens another guy, but still brings the apple juice up to her.
Yeah, and she, when she realizes he's not who he's he's not the other guy, she casts like a lightning bolt or something at him, and he blocks it with one of his signs, and she's kind of impressed by that. Like, whoa, he blocked a spell here. This guy's kind of interesting. Let me hear his story. So she's like, first, I need to bathe. And so she turns herself invisible, and he basically watches her bathe, like with water going around a nude body, kind of see-through. It was kind of interesting. And all he smells is lilac and gooseberries, right?
Oh, a callback to my initial thing I said. How about that?
That's right. And so she basically agrees to help, and she creates a portal, and he's like, I don't like portals, and he recalls one time seeing only the half of a person arrive through a portal.
Yeah.
Some people have gone into portals never to be seen again, but she's like, my portals are quite safe.
Yeah, I like how portals are like kind of like in Harry Potter. They're just like super dangerous.
Yeah. And so they her portals are reliable, so they arrive there, and she's helping Dandelion recover, but she needs something from him because, remember, he keeps a secret of what happened right away, but it kind of, did she read his mind, Dandelion's mind? That's why she knows about the seal.
The seal. Yeah, I don't know if she read his mind or if she just kind of knew how this whole thing worked.
And that's where we kind of learned about the reason the genie came right after him is because it didn't want him to utter a wish. At first I was like, oh my god, it went after that bard and killed him. I felt really bad about that, but that's not what happened. So anyway, Yennefer manipulates Geralt by biting him on the lip, and he's under her spell, and it's like lilac and gooseberries. I thought
yeah.
And he wakes up in jail, and I thought this whole thing was hilarious, where they're basically telling him, like, yeah, you marched on down, and you pulled the guy's pants down.
Yeah. You spanked him with your sword.
Then you fought off all the guards with a stick, or it was like a cane. I just picture
they basically came out armed to the teeth, and he beat them all up with a stick.
Yeah. And he was going to basically all the men who've been spreading rumors about her being a whore and all this stuff, she had Geralt go get revenge for her by humiliating them in town. And when he was on his way to the next guy, he passed out because he's a witcher. He's strong. He was fighting off the spell, but he passed out. And so now these guards come to the jail, and they're going to rough him up. And this elf guy who's with him seems like a really cool guy. Oh, Chiridian? Is that his name?
That's close. I forget 100% how he pronounced it.
Chiridian is there in jail with him. He goes, I'm here because I told them not to kill you as you were passed out, and they threw me in jail with you.
Yeah.
And he's like, oh, you mustn't kill him. And so they're down there roughing him up. They're punching Geralt in the stomach, and he says, I wish you would burst, basically. And the guy bursts in front of all of them and explodes over all of them. And I think I hadn't figured it out yet. That's how dumb I am.
Yeah, I hadn't figured it out either.
But Geralt has been granted the 3 wishes. What we don't realize is that when Geralt said the exorcism, he was actually saying, what were the exact words? Like, get the F out.
Go away or get out and go F yourself, basically.
Yeah, get out and go F yourself. That was his first wish.
So that was considered okay, I was wondering if that was one of his wishes.
So the genie took off and I guess went and F'd himself.
Yeah, I was going to say, I wonder what that looked like.
Yeah, what was that scene? So the second wish is he made this guard burst over everyone, and he exploded. And so now he's before the town's guys. I'm not really saying this properly, but the guys who run the town. He's in
the
court.
Magistrate or whatever.
Yeah, he's in court.
The mayor.
He's trying to explain. Well, you see, I was under the this sorceress. She put me under her spell, and that's why I did all of this. And one of the priests, isn't he a priest? He's like,
yeah, he's a priest.
He's like, yes, this is true, what he's saying. And he kind of explains what jinns and genies and how it all works. And she means to get control of this genie so she can become all powerful. And he's like, this is great because the genie's just going to kill her. There's no way she's powerful enough to be able to get a hold. And it's so funny because at that point, a portal opens up and it's Dandelion, and he pops through and he goes, I wish for you to understand Geralt is innocent, because he thinks he still has the wishes.
Yeah, he thinks he's got the wishes.
Yeah. And that doesn't work at all. And Geralt decides he needs to go save her. So he goes through the portal to go save her. And they're all like, you're a fool, Witcher! You'll be killed too! So they're basically, it's him and Yennefer fighting back and forth, and he's trying to tell her that, it's going to kill her. And Geralt essentially has to use his final wish here. And we're supposed to be able to figure out what the wish is. By the end, were you thinking the wish is he wishes Yennefer to fall in love with him?
Yeah, the thing was, like, I kind of had some theories about this, and it kind of wraps in the entire book. I mean, every every story that we've seen so far, except for the Edge of the World one, was kind of about like a kind of a bit of a perverted love story, you know. And you have this character who's Geralt, who is kind of trying to find meaning in his life. He's not necessarily as necessary as he once was, and so he's trying to find some sort of meaning somewhere. And I kind of think he's trying to find that meaning through love, because that's why he was so haunted by the fact that he killed Renfri, because he was killing off his chance to find this love that he was looking for. And so that's why he decided to wish for Yennefer to love him, just because maybe he was trying to find some sort of meaning in his world. I don't know. It's I know there's something there. I'm just not 100% sure.
I've read other people's interpretations of it also, which I think is interesting. One thing is that the genie intends to kill her. It wants to kill her, but it will not kill a wisher. Not a witcher, but someone who makes the wishes. So they're forbidden from killing whoever asks them for wishes. So what Geralt did is he wished his fate intertwined with hers, so
that
she
makes
could
sense.
not be killed. So now they're bound, their fates are bound forever because his wish is granted, and it kept her from being killed by the genie. So she ended up falling in love with him because of that act? I mean, there's definitely some... He did a selfless act for her, basically. I like that much better than a guy saying, hey, you love me, you have to.
I like it too, but I don't... Yennefer doesn't seem the type of character that would... that would fall in love with him because of that, you know?
She's immediately very intrigued by him. And what I think is interesting is when he sees her, he kind of says, beautiful women aren't sorceresses. They go on to be married off to men for families and stuff. So how could this beautiful woman be a sorceress? It's because she didn't start out that way. And he kind of sees her as a hunchback and immediately feels bad about thinking that and kind of casts it from his head because he doesn't want Yennefer to read his mind to see that he knows she was once a hunchback, which I thought was very interesting.
Yeah, he doesn't want her to resent him for knowing her secret.
Right. And so basically, I think it's funny when all the genie is gone and everything's died down, they go to check on him. And I think Chiridian the elf, he's like, Dandelion thinks they're dead. Like, oh my god, they're dead. And he goes and looks through the window. He's like, I think we need to give them some privacy. Because basically they're doing it, you know?
Yeah.
And so Yennefer and Geralt, there's something here. And what we find out in the stuff with Nenneke is things went bad with them. And Geralt kind of says, she was too possessive, like ordering me around and stuff. Like, she's used to having her way. And Nenneke's like, don't talk any more of this. I don't want to hear about this. And he basically is trying to give his jewels that he got from killing the Striga to Yennefer. And she's like, you don't bribe a woman you've angered with jewels. And he's like, no, it's for her to pay for... Basically, Yennefer yearns to have a child, and sorceresses can't have children. And I thought that was very interesting there, that her longing is to be a mother. And
but she had to give up that gift. Basically, her ovaries atrophied in the process of her becoming a sorceress.
Right. Like, apparently her body, had to go through some more, some kind of transformation that really messed her up inside, So Geralt, he wishes to give her what she wishes, and that is a child. And apparently they're not talking to each other right now. They're avoiding each other.
Something tells me that we're gonna see this again. This whole relationship down the line quite a bit.
I know I sped through this just for time's sake, but I thought this was a really cool chapter.
And it was. It was kind of the payoff of the entire book, really.
And I laughed out loud that his exorcism was basically telling go after yourself. That was hilarious.
Yeah. Definitely.
That was funny.
What's your overall impression of the book and the world so far?
I love the world, and I want to know more about it. I want to know more about Geralt. I want to know more about the cities and stuff, because you read about the different towns they're in, but it doesn't stick. It's just like, where? I don't understand this, or whatever. I'd like to have more of a picture painted of the world so I understand where things are, Like, oh, okay, I get this is a seaside town, and this is a town in the mountains, kind of a thing, and we kind of get an idea of where things are. I want to know. I can't wait to get to the actual novels, so we have a big story. I can't wait.
Yeah, I kind of wonder what the difference will be between the two. Like when you said that we were going to be doing a book of short stories, I was thinking that they weren't going to be nearly as connected as this was, and so it kind of. Like I said, it's not at all what I was expecting in a lot of different ways.
Yeah, we have one more book of short stories, sort of. I can't. What is the book called?
No, I don't know. I'm not.
Why
sure.
do I keep blanking on Sword of Destiny?
Sword of Destiny.
That's the next book, Sword of Destiny, and then we will be getting into the first novel called Blood of Elves, which I can't wait to get into the novel. This book is wrapped up at the end with those guys turning up again. Do you remember?
Oh, that's right. I forgot about that whole part.
They're like, you must fight him, but you cannot lay a hand on him. You cannot hit him with your sword or you'll be put to death, basically.
Yeah, basically we want our buddy to say that he beat a Witcher.
Yeah, and he's like, so I can't harm him anyway? They're like, no. And he's like, what do I have there? Why would I do this? And basically, he figures out a way to fight the guy. His name is Talus from Dorndal. He figures out a way for Talus, or Talus, I don't know how you say his name. Talos into hurting himself. He basically bounces his sword off Geralt's sword, and it goes back into his face and cuts him in the face.
Yeah.
And I think it even says he lets out kind of a whimper kind of sound, like, oh, like as it hits him, and he falls to the ground. And there's a dwarf there that greatly respects Geralt, and he goes, I hope to meet you again one day. He's the one keeping them all in check. Like, these are the rules, and if he follows the rules, then he's fine. And it's like, Geralt did nothing wrong, he's free to go. And so him and Dandelion, they ride off into the sunset,
Yeah, I love the part about where he's like, a knight without a scar is basically not a knight. And he's like, look, he's thrilled that he's got his scar. He's like on the floor, writhing in pain. You've done him
a favor. Now he's got a story about the scar. He fought a Witcher. I thought that was great stuff.
Yeah.
I'm going to say this about Andrzej Sapkowski. I love that he has this kind of like humor, this kind of frivolity to his writing. Everything's kind of fun, kind of like a nice tempo,
Yeah. Oh, man, my favorite line, I forgot, when they were fishing, my favorite line in the whole book is when Geralt says to Dandelion that you make as good a fisherman as a goat's ass makes a trumpet. Like, yes. that type of dialogue throughout the entire book was
I'm
awesome.
going to say that Andrzej Sapkowski, he's got a gift with dialogue, because the dialogue
definitely
was so good, and that was its strength, and I can't wait to read more in the next
Definitely.
book. And we're running out of time, Ross.
We have to touch on the last when Yola touches him.
Oh, yeah. Basically, Yola touches the Witcher, Geralt, as he's leaving, and she has basically a seizure of a vision. What is it, flames and stuff?
Well, it sends him into the trance, and it's basically like a bunch of broken bones and blood and a giant beast and all this really horrible stuff. So it seems like she is predicting his death. And it's kind of the reason why he is so resistant to the idea of destiny, because I don't think he wants that to happen.
Right. And part of me wonders, I don't know if you've seen the cover to the book. It's a dragon in Geralt. And there's no dragon in the friggin' book.
Yeah, I was wondering about that.
And I'm wondering, is this the vision she sees, maybe? Like, maybe
Could
this
be.
is the beast? Like, Geralt and a dragon's fates are intertwined or something? Or they just thought it was a cool cover, like somebody would buy this because there's a dragon on it. It might be that.
Everybody knows how much we love dragons.
It's like, oh, dragon, buying this book.
Yeah.
This was a lot of fun, Ross. Are we going to do the next book?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I would love to. I like I said, I am pleasantly surprised. I read a lot of fantasy stuff, and so finding one that actually isn't full of cliches and isn't just kind of what you're expecting from this type of book is really a breath of fresh air, because a lot of those books are great, and it's definitely my favorite genre, but man, they tend to run together. A lot of them do.
And I'm curious to how these will come, because from what I've heard from other people, you know, like I said, there's YouTube videos of people going over the books by chapter and stuff. I just like to hear their thoughts. That the novels are fantastic, so I can't wait to get to those.
I can only imagine they would be. Yeah, I mean, if this is, you know, the book of short stories, I'm very, very excited to really dive into the main arc.
Yeah, and from what I understand, a lot of people start with the novels, and there's a lot they're trying to keep up with. But by us reading these short stories, we'll be kind of ahead of the curve when we start.
Oh, yeah, it definitely makes sense.
Yeah,
because like in terms of the storyline timeline, this takes place first, correct?
Yes.
Gotcha.
So that's awesome. Ross, thank you so much for joining me for our ETL book club of the first Witcher book. I can't
Thank you for having me. I mean, if you would have told me when I was listening to the first book club show that I would actually be co-hosting one of the ones in the future, I would have been like, I've made it. You know,
Yes.
I've arrived.
The main thing we need to keep in mind is when we do these, it's going to take like 3 hours, apparently.
Yeah, apparently. Well, especially I think the novels are much longer. We might have to break them into a couple episodes.
Yeah, man. Jeez. It's crazy how everything runs together. But you know what? It may not be as hard because we're going by short stories. Like, okay, here's another short story. Maybe like we're just talking about the overall storyline and stuff and our favorite parts or something.
Yeah, we'll get there.
We'll figure it out. But thanks a lot, man. Thanks for taking the time to do this with me. I appreciate it.
Oh, thanks for having me, and thanks for bringing up the book club. And I can't wait to do the next one.
All right,
and
that's
maybe Steven will actually pick the book up.
Yeah. And I was going to say the best part of this is we can now start on the next book.
Oh, I know. Exactly. I'm so excited. I'm going to download it this time. Well, what was the name of the streaming service that you were telling about that has the audiobooks for a certain price per month?
Yeah, it's called Scribd, or it's spelled weird. It's like SCRIBD.
And they have a lot of audiobooks on there?
Yeah, it's they have a bunch of Witcher books on there, and basically it's like the first 30 days is free, and you can do as many books as you want in that time. But it's like $9 a month, and I thought that was pretty cheap.
That's sweet, because Audible is like $14 a month, and they give you one credit, which is like a free audio, not a free audio book, but you're basically getting any audio book for the $14 a month, and after you use that credit, you get a fat discount on anything else you want to get, but it's still not like the most, it's not the cheapest way of going about it. So I'll check that other one out, because if it's, if they have books like this quality and they have a lot of them, then I definitely want to try them. So.
Yeah, cool. Hey, let's do a sign off now.
Okay, sounds good.
Recording. Ross, thank you so much for joining me for this book club. Guys, thank you for listening, and we will see you when we do the next book. Thanks, Ross.
Catch you laters. See you, Jason. Thank you for having me on, and I can't wait to be on for the next book if you will have me.
I will. Thank you very much.